Good day, Kavibal, and welcome to our Reading Literacy webinar series. For the discussion today, the topic will be on designing home corrective and remedial reading programs for struggling readers and learners. Before we begin, take note of the following reminders. Make sure you are registered to the webinar to have your e-certificate of participation. Visit certificate.vibalgroup.com to generate your proof of attendance. Place your questions on the comment box allotted during the session and they will be addressed by our speaker later on. Share the video using hashtag LearnAs1PH as our official hashtag to our Vibal webinars. Experience learning, ka-Vibal? And now, to proceed with our webinar this afternoon, it is my pleasure to introduce to you our distinguished speaker today. He is a consultant evaluator for K-12 Philippine Basic Education, a curriculum and academic consultant of Sisters of Mary. Ladies and gentlemen, let's all welcome Brother Roderick M. Aguirre.
Good afternoon, viewers. Welcome again to one of the opportunities for us to learn together and be able to learn a lot of things, how we can get by and be able to help our students maximize their learning at home, specifically for those learners who are struggling readers and learners. It is very important for us teachers to be able to identify this type of students and therefore be able to provide certain intervention programs that are practical, that can be done at home with the help of the parents and the primary caregivers. So on that note, I don't have any shout out, but a shout out to all of you out there who are watching and happy learning together this afternoon. So let me share my PowerPoint for this afternoon on designing home corrective and remedial reading programs for struggling readers. And this is more of a school and home community partnerships. We need to understand that we've been talking for the past few months about changes happening in our educational system brought about by pandemic, and that it is now one of the demands of being able to deliver learning experiences to our students, whereby we create certain activities that can be practically done at home with the supervision of the primary caregivers, parents, or whoever are present, adults, who are ever present at home during the time the students are learning at home. Now, for the duration of our talk for this afternoon, we will follow this outline. So again, for the month of August, I added an introduction part where I will talk about certain common myths about the topic that we're discussing on this matter, myths about struggling readers, all right? Struggling readers and struggling learners. And then we're going to find certain answers, how we bust these myths and how we're going to get by with the issue of how we can create and corrective programs for our struggling readers. So with that, our discussion will have 4 questions and we're going to answer them one at a time. The first question would be, what is reading fluency and why is it important? I know that there are a lot of designs out there, but this one I'm going to focus more on reading fluency and its importance to helping our students develop their comprehension, their reading comprehension, and that if their reading fluency bags down or are not well developed, it would compromise their comprehension of any selection that they are reading or they are required to read. And then we now move on to the second question, who are struggling readers? We're going to describe who they are and why they become struggling readers and what makes struggling readers different from beginning readers and so on and so forth. And the third question would be, how do we correct or remediate their reading deficit? So I'll show you certain patterns, reading patterns, to simplify how we can identify certain problems to our students and be able to come up with certain activities at home that can somehow help our students overcome their own reading deficits. Then we have number 4, we have what home activities can be done to correct and remediate students' reading deficits. So I'll be suggesting ways how we can improve and come up with activities at home that can be integrated in their daily activities so that one way or the other within the duration of their learning at home, when our students learning at home, we are able to address the reading problems. And then we will have open forum. So if you have questions while we go along with our discussion, you may want to key in your questions and queries on the comments box below. All right. And then I'll have my conclusions and implications, mostly reminders and challenges to all of us educators who will be facing such changes in the upcoming opening of the school year 2020 and 2021. Let's begin. So let us begin with introduction, identifying myths. Identifying myths about struggling readers and learners. I just identified 4 common myths though. So let us begin with number 1. Struggling learners. A lot of people believe that students who are struggling on reading and generally on learning in general have a lower cognitive capacity than typical readers or normal or fast readers or fast learners. No, we all have the same cognitive capacities. What makes what makes a fast learner or reader different from a slow reader and from a slow learner could be on the processing of information, of giving focus on certain activities that they need to get information from so that they can process it, understanding it. Probably also there is a lagging of retrieval of information, a background experience to the fore in order for students to be able to respond to the text or to the learning process demanded of them during the time. So if you would like to know more how to bust this, I would like you again to visit my talk on developing and enhancing memory skills of our students. We all have the same memory capacities. We all, the way we process information, it goes through all the memory systems from sensory system, sensory register, to short-term memory or working memory to the long-term memory. All of us have the same way, the process of doing that. Only that, again, as I've said, something happens along the way, and that's what we need to identify because we call that as a breakdown in the processing. So that's a myth. They do not have lower cognitive capacity. They have the same capacity, only that probably because of less literacy activities at home, or probably too many students inside the classroom, that some of the teachers are not able to pay attention to these individual students who have, struggles on how to process information. So that's what we're gonna talk about later. And then second myth is lower expectations for students that are falling behind due to reading. Oh, this is one of the common myths of educators that if somehow we identify students or a group of students or a section, although we're no longer doing homogeneity sectioning of classes, but say we have group students who are slow readers, struggling readers in one class, and they're in a homogeneous section. What a lot of teachers would do is to lower down the standards so that students are able to cope with the lowered standards. That is a myth. Even if our students are struggling, they still have that capacity to be able to rise up and meet the standards, but they require a lot of support, not just from teachers, but from classmates and from members of the family to help them with their individual problems. And that the important thing here is that we're able to identify specifically what causes the struggle of our students, the individual situations of students as per their experience in struggling with their learning, with their reading, would be different from one student to another, and being able to identify specifically their problem would do the trick. That's why second statement, lowering expectations for students are falling behind due to reading, is a myth. That's not true. We could probably simplify activities, but not lower down expectations. All right. Next would be our curriculum needs to be needs to embed leveled reading no matter the goal is. This is a myth, although this is partly true, but not totally true. Reason being is that we embed leveled reading materials in the curriculum, not because there is no purpose to it. There's a purpose. We need to have a leveled reading materials for our students so that they can focus more on what skills they need to hone and to learn from. This is what we call as instructional text. The instructional texts are made by writers in such a way that it allows students to focus on what they're supposed to learn in the lesson. Example will be, if you would like to focus more on a certain type of vocabulary, you give them or create an instructional text that focuses only on those. Or if your lesson is on grammar and your lesson is on identifying proper nouns, then you create a text or a selection that allows students to pay attention to what you want them to focus on. All right. So the embedded level reading materials are there for a purpose. All right. But it's partly true because we do not just allow our students to engage in text level or grade level selections. We also need to provide them with authentic materials so that they can apply the skills, the reading skills that they have acquired from the use of leveled text reading materials to a non-level text or a content area text, which I will discuss that later this evening when I discuss about language and content integration, how we can integrate the language lessons to up to students applying the skills they acquired from language subjects to the other content areas. And that's what the number 3 here will be thoroughly discussed tonight and during my continuation of my topic this afternoon. And the last myth is audiobooks are cheating. Students should be taught to read. This is a myth, especially for students who are learning to read in a language, in a new language, in a foreign language, or a second language. Audiobooks provide our students with a model of the fluency required of them to acquire and learn, so that it would facilitate the comprehension of the selection itself or the language used in the selection. So audiobooks really are really not for cheating. They are support to students in the acquisition of certain level of fluency. All right. So with that, we have busted and we have identified 4 common myths about learning and struggling readers in general. Let's begin our discussion to be able to find some answers why those common understanding of our educators are myths. So question number 1, what is reading fluency and why is it important? Again, as I've said, there are many designs out there how we can design corrective and remedial reading programs, but for the sake of easy understanding, I will be zoning on fluency. If you would like to focus more on a specific deficit, we have topics on creating and designing remedial programs, corrective and remedial programs for vocabulary deficit and other other deficits for that matter. But for here, we're talking about in general reading, struggling readers. And I would like to focus more on fluency because it's the easiest way for us to identify students who are struggling in reading the elements of fluency. So reading or reading fluency is defined as the ability to read accurately, smoothly, and with expression. So if our students are accurately attacking words or has accurately apply their word attack skills, decoding skills, and are reading it with certain expressions so that they give emotive meaning to words, especially the conwords, thereby helping them focus more on getting meaning from the selection instead of focusing more on sounding off individual sounds in the word to form words and connecting the words. So this is what we call as decoding process. So our students have mastered the decoding skills to the point that automaticity, speed, speed, and accuracy with prosody are all at play, okay, are all at play to provide students with the necessary focus in order to let them get and understand the meaning from what they are reading, all right? I'll show you an example how fluency affects comprehension, all right? So the fluent reader, okay, should be able to focus on understanding or getting meaning from text because they are now fluent reading or because of their fluency skills or reading fluency skills. And for this afternoon, we'll be focusing more on those basic four elements of fluency. We have accuracy, rate and speed, and we have automaticity, and we have prosody. Now, these four elements lend to the readers to become comprehenders of the selection or a reading that or the reading of the material required them to study on. It could be in language, it could be in Filipino, it could be in mathematics, and so on and so forth. The easy way to explain that is if students are still on the decoding process, they're still learning how to decode, that's beginning reading, how to decode the language of the text, then our students are still struggling to comprehend the text. That's why most materials for beginning readers or for teaching them how to decode, the texts are so simple, not lengthy, not too wordy. Words are highly structured. So in this case, our students, especially on the middle school to junior high school and senior high school, we're expected to be fluent readers because the demands of reading different selections in the different subject area is so high that if they are not fluent readers, they are not accurately attacking words, the speed of ease to reading, connecting words to form phrases to sentences, and there's no automaticity of attacking words and meaning, attaching meaning to it, and no expressions to the words that they're saying, then comprehension backs down. Hence, our students struggle on the activity on the reading activity or the reading demand. Let's focus individually on this element. So let's now look at reading accuracy. Reading accuracy refers to reading words without mistakes. That's why in the early grades, it's very important for us to train our students methodically, basta yung palagi, okay? Routinely, I cannot pronounce the word methodically, or routinely, reading sight words, all right? We can use the Dulce basic sight words, but the Dulce basic sight words only is up to grade 3, but we can also utilize Fry's graded sight words, all right? So we already have Fry's graded sight words until junior high school. So you may want to research or Google it, and then you will have a list of it. It means that these are words that do not have to be decoded. They are accurately attacked, and no decoding process is used. Only that some of these words, when they see, there is what we call now as accurately attacked. Hence, accuracy also leads to automaticity, right? Nonetheless, if our students have accuracy, then the speed, it will be shown via their speed. Like reading rate or speed refers to how quickly and effortlessly a child can decode words in sentences. They are able to attack the words. The level of words would be on the accentuation or syllable base, sound level, syllable level, word level, phrase level, uh, or what we call as meaning level. So the speed would show where our students at in terms of their decoding levels. So if our students are still focused on individual sounds, sounding off and blending sounds, that means they are still on a very slow level. Therefore, it would be difficult for them to attack selections that are too wordy and too lengthy. All right. Next would be reading automaticity. Automaticity is the fast, effortless word recognition that comes with a great deal of reading practice. So reading automaticity is the continuous exposure of students to words, especially for what we call a high frequency words. There are a lot of these high frequency words are words that appear in all selection the grade level. So it's very important for us that we allow our students to continuously read materials. That's why it's very important for us that there are reading activities for our students in all subject areas so that reading automaticity is honed among our students. That's why I had a lot of misgivings when there was an issue about no homeworks and no assignments and so on and so forth. And I said it would take its toll on the reading automaticity skills of our students, because if our teachers are no longer allowed to provide students assignments and homeworks, well, which I would say should have been fruitful if teachers provide students with advanced readings or reading of, of selections that would enhance their reading automaticity. We would have no problems right now with reading problems with our students. Only that we have pampered so much our students as we move on and as we progress as a society and as a community in the Philippines. A lot of parents are seeing students struggling with their reading skills, and they felt like their kids are being punished for this homework and assignments, when in reality, these homeworks and assignments are for the students. And sometimes students need to struggle in order to improve. There will be no improvement if there is no struggle. When students are in a struggling state or state of disequilibrium, this is what we call as the learnability stage, because there's something that they do not know that they need to practice and keep on doing. Now, what's good about the pandemic is that all of these skills in reading fluency will now be given emphasis, because our students will be doing this at home. And whether our parents like or not, they need to support the acquisition of the reading fluency skills of their kids. Otherwise, their children will suffer a lot in reading a lot of modules from different subject areas, and therefore students, their children, will be struggling so much in understanding the content of the other subject area. So later this evening, I will discuss how we can integrate language with the learning of the content. But point being is that even if we teach our students how to integrate language with the learning of the content, the content areas, if our students are still struggling readers, then it is still a difficult task to do. For me, if you ask my opinion, integration can happen effortlessly and effectively if our students have reached a certain level of reading fluency and they are now somehow reaching independent reading level. Until such time that they have not reached that, our students will be struggling so much on lots of reading activities, because I believe there will be no situation in the learning, there will be no situation or instance in the teaching and learning process that will not require students to read. If you can think of an activity that there is no requirement of reading, then sige po, I'm willing to listen to your comments down below. All right, sir. Reporting po, kailangan nila sabihin nyo, but they had to read, they had to research, right? Sir, naka-online po, but they have to read. In fact, when they take tests, they have to read. Sir, hindi po, nakikinig po sila sa lecture ng teacher. Oh, why the teacher is not using instructional materials to augment her lecture? Meron po, then they are reading. There is no incident in the teaching and learning process that does not require our students to engage in reading. And if we do not pay attention to helping our students acquire fluency skills, speed, accuracy, automaticity, and prosody, then our students become struggling readers. All right? Let me give you an example. Say, this is the selection that we want our students to read. And the blanks are the words that students are not able to fluently read, meaning they cannot accurately attack the word. They do not recognize the word. Speed is compromised because they cannot automatically attack the words and accurately, decode the words. I'll read it the way a struggling reader would, given this example. On a time where little and the see if students are not able to identify especially content words in a selection, this is very simple, 3 little pigs. Do you think there's comprehension? No, they are concerned in decoding the words. And since they cannot recognize most of the words, let's just say just the first sentence, you know that the comprehension of the whole selection will be compromised. Hence, they are struggling. That's why it's very important for our students to acquire fluency, all right? So, fluent readers recognize words automatically without struggling over decoding issues. In fact, hindi mo pa nakikita yung pagbabasa mo, hindi mo nakikita lahat ng words, yung utak mo somehow nag-string na kung ano ang susunod na words. Why? Because you already have a plethora of words that you have acquired because of constant engagement in reading activities. And that's why it is important that sana po mga magulang at mga teachers out there, hindi po natin pinaparusahan ang mga bata if we are asking them to read and read and read. It is not for our sake. It is not because it would make them suffer, or in one way or the other, it would make them a better person. No, it is primarily to help them become fluent readers and be able to learn from what they are reading. All right. Also, fluency is important because it bridges between word recognition and comprehension. All right. So if our students are fluent, the words would now make sense, and students will now have more time comprehending the selection instead of focusing on decoding individual words in the sentence, in the paragraph, and in the whole selection. That's too much. That's why ang mga struggling readers na may problema sa automaticity, sa accuracy, sa prosody, ang tingin nila sa ay nakakapagod magbasa. Why? Because they focus on decoding. That's too taxing. In fact, once they are fluent readers, they will know that there are certain words that they don't have to attack. But then again, that will be a later activity once we have identified our students to be independent readers. Okay, so let's now have the second question. So basically, when we say fluency or reading fluency, we're talking about, although pwede natin pagsama-samahin kasi yan, we can say accuracy and rate and accuracy, automaticity and automaticity and prosody. But as much as possible, I would like to identify specifically which of those our students have difficulty with. Mayroon ba silang problema sa accuracy o di alam natin kung ano ang ibibigay natin na activity sa bahay? Kung may problema ang bata sa sa speed. Alam natin nang bibigyan natin mga activities mga bata, di ba yung may mga slashes tayo, modeling, reading aloud, we already had sessions on that. And then kung ito ay expression, probably we can ask our students to listen to radio programs and listen how uh, how written words or written statements are actually read aloud with expression. Okay. Now, the second question is, who are struggling readers? So let us now have just a simple understanding who among our students are can be considered struggling readers or beginning readers. I would like to encourage all of us not to label our students as non-readers. I do not believe that there are non-readers out there, because whether we like it or not, no matter how uneducated, or no matter how stupid you think some students are or some individuals are, there is a certain level of reading happening when they engage in oral text or written text. Now the point is that they may not have been taught well, or they have not entered formal education to be able to engage in formal education in acquiring these certain skills for them to become fluent independent readers. All right, so let's answer that question. So we call a student as a beginning reader if, all right, she has not acquired accuracy. And if there's no accuracy, definitely speed will be compromised. And since there is no accuracy and no rate and speed skills, then automaticity is also compromised. Ibig sabihin, paano siya magkakaroon ng automaticity of attacking words kung wala naman siyang decoding skills, right? So kung wala siyang decoding skills, edi walang proceeding. Paano siya makakapagbasa ng mga expression? Hence, comprehension will break down. Hindi po sila struggling readers, ladies and gentlemen. They are called beginning readers. They do not have the skills yet. They have not been taught. Sir, nasa high school na po sila. Wala pa silang skills. Then therefore, our identification here is that these students have not been explicitly taught the skills. Probably the teachers in the elementary, I'm not generalizing, I'm just saying probably our teachers, because of too many students that they handle, were not able to pay attention to the students, hoping that eventually as they progress from grade 1 up to grade 6, they will somehow, with the hope that they're being constantly exposed to the teacher talk, be exposed to that, and eventually implicitly acquire these skills, specifically reading fluency skills. Now, the point here is that, as I've mentioned when I talked about teaching comprehension of narrative text, teaching comprehension of informational text, reading are sets of skills that should be explicitly taught. We do not hope that students will acquire this. There are certain stages that our students go through for them to enable to acquire all of these skills with teacher explicitly showing, not just explaining, showing how the skills are actualized and have an interplay, how the skills interact together for students to become expert readers and fluent readers. All right. Sorry po, ano lang po ako, medyo, when we talk about struggling readers, kasi struggling learners, kasi I get so emotional because of mislabeling of our students. We're not able to come up with an appropriate program, an appropriate intervention program or remediation program for them. And more often than not, even if we have identified them, a lot of our teachers out there are somehow unable to provide intervention programs because they were not also trained during college how to handle situations and problems like this among students. A lot of our teachers have been trained to teach, but we're not thoroughly taught how to identify through diagnosis and testing, identify certain specific problems of our students. And if it falls under reading problems, and since they do not have a lot of experiences on handling reading problems way back in college and even their initial experience in teaching, then they are left knowing, left knowing and wanting what to do. All right, so that's it. Those are beginning readers. Kahit nasa high school pa yan, at kung wala nung mga skills na yon, hindi siya struggling readers. Hindi rin siya non-reader. Ang tawag sa kanya, beginning reader. Ibig sabihin, hindi siya naturuan ng mga skills na yon. So anong gagawin po natin? Magsasuffer siya. Magsasuffer siya sa grade level na yan dahil ang expectation po natin pag pumasok sa grade level, especially for grade 7, ay readers, independent readers na siya. Eh hindi nga naturuan ng mga basic fluency skills. So dapat gawin. Ang tawag dun po ay remediation. Pero teaching them, ang ganyang remediation is teaching them beginning reading skills. We have to go back. Only that it's not the materials preparation for students like this. We call them as adult beginning readers. Okay? Meron po ito sinasabi natin na young beginning readers or early literacies or young beginning readers. And we also have what we call as adult. Okay? Adult beginning readers. Ito yung mga sinasabi po natin ng mga, especially those who are in ALS na medyo may edad na or they're already teenagers when they want to enter public school system or formal education. So kailangan muna nilang kailangan nila muna turuan paano ang beginning reading skills. All right? So let's now look at struggling readers. If our students somehow have accuracy and speed, but struggle still, they have not mastered automaticity or skills on automatically attacking certain words because they were not thoroughly taught on how to attack meaning of words through structural analysis, through contextual analysis, through the use of dictionary, and through other intervention to other ways how to get the meaning of certain words, then prosody is compromised. Okay, and once our students have problems with automaticity and prosody, even if they have accuracy and speed, yung mga bata ang galing magbasa, mag-oral read, pinabasa mo tapos ang na-attack naman nila, pero monotonous siya magsalita, pero tama ang accuracy niya, tama yung speed niya, talagang ang poses niya, tama naman, pero walang expression, okay, walang expression, monotonous siya. Pero nag-struggle siya sa certain words. May mga words na hindi niya mabasa, especially for technical words. Pero in general, maganda pakinggan. Tanungin mo siya pagkatapos, hindi niya naintindihan. Ito yung mga bata na nababasa niya, pero at the end, ano pa ulit? Hindi, wala pa ako naintindihan. So these kids were just decoding orally the words. So therefore, they're not reading. Okay, kaya nga, bumagsak ang comprehension. Now, those are types of struggling readers. Now, since we have identified that their problem is an automaticity which compromise their prosody, then anong ibibigay natin intervention? Automaticity muna towards prosody. Okay? Anong gagawin po natin? And then teaching the vocabulary skills. Okay, teaching vocabulary skills so that once they are now independently, automatically attacking words without stopping and pausing a lot, then expression will not be compromised and they are now able to focus more on comprehension. Hindi siya masyadong remedial more of corrective lang. Kasi may konti lang naman ang ibibigay sa kanya. Usually the vocabulary instruction test in our curriculum would begin, especially for Filipino and mother tongue, it already starts at grade 1 and grade 2 up to grade 3. While for English, we're talking about public school, okay? For English, it begins in grade 2 and grade 3. So there's transitioning of the skills from the mother tongue to Filipino and to English. That will be a whole new different topic next time around. Okay, so let's have another scenario. If our students have problems with accuracy, all right, and speed, but they still have automaticity and prosody. There are a lot of students who were not taught decoding skills, but somehow because of they are able to recognize certain words. I know a lot of cases of students, they know words but wala may expression po, pero ang problema naman po ay merong speed. It somehow compromises their comprehension, but they are not necessarily remedial. They are what we call as just struggling readers because certain skills have not been mastered, or hindi naman totally wala. I do not believe that students have automaticity and prosody. They have speed problems, or accuracy problem, it's probably they are just what we call as careless readers. If they're careless whispers, we call them as careless readers. Ito yung they run on punctuation marks. Yung may proceeding may automaticity, pero hindi nila alam kung kailan sila magpo-pause, kailan sila mag-stop. So meron kayong mga estudyante ganun, di ba? Tama naman ang kanya expression. Ganito siya magbasa, oh. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that's within me, bless His holy name. Aba, dire-diretso, pero meron siyang ganon. May up and down, may prosody, and you feel, kaya lang po minsan na-compromise ang comprehension dahil hindi mo alam kung nag-stop siya doon or kama siya doon. Is this a list of description or it was the end of an idea? Okay? So, importante din na alam ng bata ang certain pauses because of the punctuation marks. That would fall under speed, of course, and would fall under accuracy. All right. So of course, comprehension will be compromised. All right. There you go. So those are, we know now how in general, okay, kung nasa klase po tayo, magkakaroon po tayo ng specific, magda-diagnosis pa tayo. Pero since this is a webinar, I cannot go through certain details how to identify those. I'm just simply making it more practical for you to understand. So do not call your students, I said, non-readers. Better yet, call them beginning readers if they do not have all the basic skills. Non-reader, hindi sila non-readers, beginning readers yan. Kahit pa adult, ang tawag sa kanila ay adult beginning readers. Okay? Sir, paano kung matanda na? Tawagin na lang po din natin adult beginning readers. Huwag naman tayong tatawagin na old beginning readers, old people beginning readers. Huwag na lang po, adult na lang din po siguro. Okay? So, we call them struggling readers because there are certain specific type of fluency reading or reading skills that they have not mastered, which somehow affects their comprehension or becomes a barrier for them to focus on comprehension. Hindi ibig sabihin na walang comprehension. Merong comprehension, kaya lang bumabagal. That's why it's called struggling. Bumabagal sila because they are focusing more or they are being tediously being pressured to focus more on certain skills like decoding skills. So let's proceed to the third question. How do we correct or remediate their reading and learning deficits? All right. So I would like us to use a very simple template or designed by Valencia and Bully, which they presented in 2004. Why do I have a comma there? All right. Valencia and Bully 2004. They said that we will be able to identify or cluster, come up with a reading program specific to our students if we are able to identify specifically their problem in reading or clusters of problem in reading. So Valencia and Bully, this is a simple design that I've been using with the Sisters of Mary, and when we created our reading programs, our remedial reading programs for our students, okay, and how to remediate them. So there are, according to Valencia and Bully, we just use the identification that whether our students have specific reading difficulties, all right, specific word reading difficulties, or what we call as SWRD. Now, this focuses more if we know that we have been able to identify that our students have specific word reading difficulties. At least our focus now is on decoding towards, word recognition and word attack, okay, or what we call as word knowledge. So, ang kailangan turo lang natin dito sa mga bata ay word knowledge, and one of the requirements for our students to be on the level of word knowledge or vocabulary instruction or vocabulary development enhancement, they have mastered the skills of master the skill of, dito pala silang turuan ng automaticity, ng speed and accuracy. Sa decoding po natin yan, all right? Another cluster of problems that we may be able to identify is that students have specific word they do not have specific word reading difficulties, but instead they have specific reading comprehension difficulties, meaning meron silang, they recognize, they can attack words, but the problem is they're not able to comprehend word selection because of reading comprehension skills problem. A good example would be they have not mastered the skills of comprehending narrative text. They have not mastered the skills of comprehending informational text, because once they are now fluent, students now will be using critical reading skills to be able to get information from different text types or types of text that they're reading. And text types, as I have discussed in one of my seminars, can be clustered by Anderson, clustered into two. Anderson 2004, clustered into uh, literary texts and informational text. And if you would like to know more of those reading comprehension skills on informational narrative text, please do not hesitate to go back to and review my webinar or my topic on teaching comprehension of narrative text and teaching comprehension of informational text. That would fall under this cluster, specific reading comprehension difficulties. Ibig sabihin po, kahit ang bata po ay mayroong, they are fluent already, but they were not taught the comprehension skills of attacking certain text types or certain types of genre, then or we call it a genre reading, our students will still be struggling. And wala naman siyang problema, naintindihan ko ng mamang words, pati hindi ko siya naintindihan. Anong ibig sabihin ng author dito? Kagaya ng science text, kagaya ng math text, mga readers naman ng mga yan, bakit hindi sila nakakapag-adjust? But it's because they're not able to adjust to the type of structure, the type of nature of how the language behaves in that particular subject here. And that's what I'm going to discuss later on this evening. I took away that topic because I would like to focus more on helping our students overcome their deficits in reading in general. So we'll just focus on the three clusters. Now, there's another cluster of reading problems of our struggling students. It is a combination of specific word reading problem, or SWRD, and problems with reading comprehension, and that's what we call as mixed reading difficulties. Now, if you ask my opinion, sino sa kanila ang corrective, sino sa kanila ang remedial? All right? Ang remedial kasi is profound, okay? Profound ang kaniyang deficit, in reading deficit, that greatly affects their comprehension. Therefore, students with mixed reading difficulties, they have problems with word attack skills and reading comprehension skills. Put them together, definitely they are remedial. All right? No matter how a grade level teacher tried to help them with comprehension skills, focusing on how to understand the selection of signs in grade 4, grade 5, and since they still struggle with words, then they are remedial because the basic skills the basic skills that they should have acquired in the lower grades, which should act as a foundation for critical reading skills like comprehension skills, are not present. Hence, students are experiencing a lot of problems in the reading activity. That I would call as a remedial situation. Therefore, students who have specific reading difficulties, SWRD, and with specific reading comprehension difficulties, they are remedial. Okay, but if students are saying they only have specific problems, say specific reading comprehension difficulties, corrective na lang yun kasi fluent naman na sila eh. Sa specific word reading difficulties po, ito po sila ay may mga problema sa word attacks like automaticity, perhaps on prosody. Again, para sa akin po, struggling lang din because we can just, focus on those specific deficits and then they will still, kasi comprehenders pa rin to. Ang specific word reading difficulties, students with specific or SWRD can still comprehend. Medyo mabagal-bagal lang ng konti. Students with specific reading comprehension difficulties, may comprehension level din, pero medyo mabagal lang din or hindi ganun kataas, pero mayroong comprehension. But with mixed reading kaya that's why they can be called corrective. Madali lang silang tutukan. But for those mixed reading difficulties, it's a conglomeration of long overdue skills that should have been taught to the students from the early grades to the middle grades to the junior high school grades that nagkapatong-patong na dahil hindi naturuan kaya naging mixed reading difficulties. All right? So, only, again, sasabihin ko pa ulit, nangyayari itong ganito kung talagang nagkaroon ng pagtuturo ng reading. Kasi kung hindi naman pala tinuruan ng reading, they cannot be considered as mixed reading difficulties. It is called as beginning reading. Why? No teaching of reading skills took place. I'm pretty sure a lot of situations in the Philippines, that's based on our results of our students having reading problems in Bicol. I think not just in Bicol, but a lot of most all places in the Philippines. It's because our teachers were not trained to teach beginning reading on specific word reading, how to teach students vocabulary enhancement, how to teach comprehension. Our teachers, English and Filipino, were taught to teach the language, but are wanting on skills how to teach reading on that language. Now, also other subject areas like English, like science and mathematics, they're just teaching content area, but requiring their students to read. Hence, they should also teach reading in their content areas. Again, go back to my topic on teaching reading across the content areas. We want to look into those topics that I've discussed before. So we will be focusing on these three patterns or three groups of clusters of students possible deficits in readings: SWRD, SRCD, and SRD. All right. So again, if you have questions on this, you may want to ask me, and do not hesitate to key in your questions and clarifications in the comments box below. I know at this point you have a lot of questions to ask me. I would gladly answer them later on. All right. So let's proceed. So specific word reading difficulties, these are the descriptions of students with SWRD, with SWRDs. They have decoding problems and sometimes phonemic awareness. Their phonemic awareness is below average. All right? So mababa ang kanilang decoding talaga to the point that pag nagbasa sila talagang maririnig mo sila na I'm looking at certain text beyond my camera. It says and ang sale naging sale, okay? So kasi nagkaka-mix niya ang kanyang ang decoding rules in Filipino and English. So naguguluhan siya lalo dahil nga ang nangyari ay nagkanya-kanya ang Filipino teacher at saka English teacher to the point na hindi nagkaroon ng hindi na-harmonize sa utak ng bata na there are certain rules of decoding in Filipino that cannot be applied in English, like the use of short sounds and long sounds. Wala namang long sounds sa Filipino. Kung meron po, sige, mag-key in po kayo sa akin kung meron po talaga. I may be wrong, and maybe my knowledge about sound system of Filipino is outdated. Baka may bago na po siya ngayon. Studies, then please educate me too. Alright, next. Spelling is below average. Kasi kung decoding pa lang, kasi there are what we call as patterns of decoding. So kung may patterns like CVC silent E, as we have initial consonant clusters, then we have what we call as final consonant clusters, and a combination of initial consonant clusters and final consonant clusters. So ang decoding kasi tinuturo din natin with the spelling patterns. All right? So kung mababang decoding, definitely mababang spelling ng mga bata. Next, oral vocabulary listening comprehension at least average. Nakaintindi sila sa oral at saka listening, pero ang problema ay sa reading. Naiintindihan nila sa listening, naiintindihan nila sa they can explain, pero pagdating sa reading, magkaiba kasi ang oral vocabulary from listening vocabulary to reading vocabulary. All right? Now, also, fluency often below average due to decoding problems. Dahil nga ang mga bata below ang kanilang decoding level, hence, compromise ang kanilang speed, compromise ang kanilang accuracy, ang kanilang automaticity, and of course, definitely the prosody. All right? Or, yeah, prosody. Is that right pronunciation? Prosody or prosody? Well, I've learned it as prosody because it's prosody. Okay. We'll check it later on. My pronunciation may be wrong, but I have been pronouncing the word prosody as prosody. It may be prosody. Anyway, I'll check. I'll check later on. Next would be reading comprehension, often below average due to decoding problems. But I said again, if our students are not fluent readers, they will struggle with comprehension. They cannot focus, pay attention on getting meaning because they're focusing on sounding off or barking at print or sounding off the sounds in the words and stringing the words to make sentences, phrases, and stringing phrases into sentences. And it's a lot of work for struggling readers. Okay. So what are the strengths? So students with SWRDs, they have good ability to learn orally. Okay? So ibig sabihin, kung magre-remediate po tayo sa kanila, kung magre-remediate, we start with oral. Okay? With oral intervention. So ibig sabihin, lahat ng gusto nating ituro sa mga bata, i-oral muna natin. Wag mo munang like, kung magre-reading sila, ang gayon muna ay wag muna silang mag-silent reading or mag-reading aloud. Listening to the teacher reading. Okay, next. Reading comprehension is strong when children read text they can decode. So, ang nangyari dito is that they can, medyo naintindihan ng mga bata if the text that we're going to provide them are within their level of decoding. Okay, decodable. We call it as decodable selections. Kagaya ng panahon namin, ang tawag yung Henny Penny is a hen. Henny Penny is a red hen. So parang padagdag ng padagdag, cumulative in nature. So poems are good. So madali sila makaintindi ng decodable selections, pero beyond that, they will struggle so much. So if you have students like this in grade 3, 4, 5, 6, then we can say that these are students having specific word reading difficulties. And what do? These are the things that we can do. All right. 1, explicit, systematic phonics intervention. Wala po tayong magagawa kung hindi magsimula at bumalik sa phonics instruction. All right? So, ang ginagamit po, prolifically ginagamit naman natin sa Pilipinas ay the Marongko approach. Marongko approach. You may want to research on the Marongko approach on phonics instruction intervention, because it helps our students also become fluent towards comprehending selections and not just focusing on phonics instruction. Do not misconstrue me when I say specifically teaching students individual sounds. No, not that. What I'm trying to say here is phonics in a whole language perspective. Will you teach students a certain sound and connect it to words? Hindi yung sh, e, o, u, ba, baby, bobo. That could have worked before, pero mas maganda sana yung b, boy, b, ano ba mga, basketball, b, basket. So meron siya na initial sounds, final sounds, medial sounds, and so on and so forth. There is specific intervention. So you teach sounds in the context of a word so that merong meaning nun. And the words that we're going to use, of course, would be content words. Huwag tayong gumamit ng mga grammatical words are like articles. Alangan, bigyan mo sa mga bata like by, by. Anong meaning nun? Sana ginawa mo ay verb, by, buy. Yung mga ganon. Wag yung, so pag pumili daw tayo ng words for teaching phonics intervention would be choose content words in the order of nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. But for me, I would focus more on nouns and verbs. Then later on, adjectives will be easy to teach to them once they have mastered a certain level of decoding skills. Next would be phonemic awareness and fluency intervention if needed through modeling. So kailangan nating sabihin sa mga bata na ang tamang pagkakabasa. A lot of teachers would say, I think it's a short sound and it should not be long. So it's or what? Mango. We do not say mango. There are a lot of, a lot of errors. I'm not saying mistake. These are errors, misconceptions of teachers when teaching phonics and phonemic awareness to our students. I think we already had a training on teaching beginning reading. You may want to go back and rummage through the files of Vibal Group on YouTube, on their YouTube channel and their Facebook Live, and rummage through which of those webinar topics delivered previously, probably way back as far back as March on beginning reading. So you may want to look into that. So ito pong sinasuggest ko, mga fluency activities. Ample opportunities to apply decoding skills in oral text reading with teacher-parent feedback. So again, explicit po talaga to. So dapat kung ang bata ay nagkamali or kailangan ng tulong, kailangan natin tulong. Kagaya ng ginagawa ko sa mga sabi ng bata. Kasi we have some reading books at home. Thank you very much, Vibal, for sending me your chikiting books. And that's why I have those at home. So the chikiting books ang sa bata. Ang isang pamangkin ko sabi niya, Uncle, is this 3 or 3? I would say, look at it again. Does it start with an individual t, or does it start with two consonants that should have one sound? Sabi niya, it has 3 consonants, T, H, and R. Do I say tr? No. Baka hindi pa niya na master ang phonic sounds na or theta. Okay? The interdental. Okay? I'd love to talk about that at length, but I don't have enough time. I need to focus on intervention and how we can do it. So those are specific activities that you can, there are a lot of activities on YouTube that you can browse over and learn from it. What I'm saying is that it is very important for students, for kids at home, to listen to feedbacks from adults whether they're doing it right, because hindi pwedeng sabihin mo sa bata, oh, ikaw, pakinggan mo kung tama ang rinig mo sa sarili mo. Hindi, it takes a learned individual or an adult to provide scaffold or support to the students on their phonics learning, especially for phonics intervention. Also, okay, sorry. Let's now proceed to the second cluster of students with certain specific problems or struggling with specific reading comprehension skills. So we call them as SRCDs. Their description are decoding at least average. So there's a decoding, okay? Nakakapag-decode talaga sila. So fluency is not really that low. In fact, fluency is average. Reading comprehension below average. But remember, as I've said, there is still a level of comprehension. Dahil decoders sila, one way or the other, hindi ibig sabihin non-reader sila. They are decoders, but probably they lack the comprehension skills to understand a narrative text or an informational text. Hence, there's a possibility that they are just understanding the selection at a certain level, especially on a literal level. But in a higher level, perhaps it's still something that they need to be trained on. Next, oral vocabulary and listening comprehension may be weak. Magkabaliktad po naman sila. Doon sa unang klase naman po ay strong ang vocabulary at listening comprehension ng bata. Pero dito naman baliktad, makamahina sila. That's why probably hindi sila nasanay na meron palang ganon. Ang mga bata na hindi nasanay nakikinig ng mga radyo, nanonood, talagang, I'm sorry, has been early exposed to online games, especially non-story based online games. Kasi meron pong mga online games na may stories na somehow provide students with an exposure to plots. Okay, plots of the story. So somehow meron silang idea ng isang narrative text. I remember when I was teaching foundation of reading and acquisition of reading, critical reading skills to some of my students in University of the East, way back when I was still a new professor. A lot of my students, when I taught them how to narrative text and connected that to writing, they were so happy that at that time, ang kilalang-kilala na story-based online games were, Ragnarok, Dota, all right. So, nung gumagawa na sila ng mga kwento, most of their stories were based on their online story-based games, and I said I had to accept it because that's their exposure. Had they been exposed to Shakespearean type of literature or novels, Victorian era written novels, they could have written classic type of stories, but this is their exposure, and who am I to say no? And it's their application and connection of what they know and applying it to the oldest. That's the point of specific reading comprehension difficulties for our students. They may not have been exposed early on to this type of genre and to this type of to this type of genre and to this type of text type. That's why it's very important for us parents at home that we expose our students to not just story-based, like watching cartoons or watching telenovela. Story-based lang po yun, literature-based, literary-based. What about information-based? Do we expose them to say news? The news are informational texts that it does not have emotive languages as opposed to the language used in literary text. But it is also one way of helping our students be exposed to the cognitive landscape of informational text before they are tasked to read informational text in science and mathematics. That's probably one of the reasons why our students hate reading science and mathematics and araling panlipunan, because they resemble the type of text in news. Sabi ng mga bata, hindi pa naman po ako matanda, kaya hindi pa ako mahilig sa news. Sabi ko, wow, sabi matatanda lang. No, it's because parents have not exposed, adults have not exposed these kids to listening and watching informational texts. Right? So yun ang isang kasunod. Next would be fluency may be weak due to language limitations, not for decoding. Hindi sila non-decoder. They are not just familiar with the language. A good example is that they, from mother tongue, magaling silang decoders sa, they are readers in mother tongue, and they are now being transitioned to English. So, hindi nila ma-transfer ang skills nila sa reading, yung reading skills nila sa mother tongue, because the language of English is still unfamiliar to them. So, ang mga bata dito, they are struggling for comprehension because their fluency in the new language is still need to be acquired. They still need to acquire the skills of the language. So, paano nga naman sila magkakaroon ng reading? How can they decode if they do not know the language yet? Especially that the sound system of the mother tongue is different from the sound system of the English language. The grammar of the mother tongue is different from the grammar of the English language. So nagkakaroon ng away. So kahit nagkaroon siya ng decoding skills dito sa mother tongue dahil hindi tinuro ng teacher the language and how to decode, how to transfer, and what's the decoding skill, how to transfer the decoding skills to the skills, the language, behavior of and rules of the new language, then wala rin. So yan ang problema. All right? So students failed to transfer their skills. That's why it's called specific reading comprehension difficulties. Sabi, sir, dapat direct na ang bata mismo nakakapag-connect na nun kasi naturuan na naman namin siya ng skills. No. Again, we go back to the premise. These are skills, and like any other skills, they are explicitly taught. A good example would be, you know how to cook adobo, kunwari lang, adobo or spaghetti here. And nakasulat po siya sa English. Would you know what you're cooking if the recipe is written in French? Sir, sabihin na natin walang picture. Would you be able to decode and comprehend a recipe in making spaghetti? Alam mo siya, nagtindihan mo siya sa English, pero ang binigay sa iyo na selection ay French. Hindi ka non-reader. Nagkaroon ka lang ng problema sa comprehension because you do not know the language. Definitely, how can comprehension happen if you are not familiar with the language? So you are not non-readers. You are still struggling to understand and know the language. Okay. Specific reading comprehension difficulties, their strengths are good foundational reading skills. Magandang na ang foundation nila. So yun sinasabi ko, probably poor in transfer of skills. Next, spelling is often strong. Ang galing kasi nga strong ang decoding eh. Alright? So what are the intervention needs that we can? So ito po sila ay mga corrective lang naman po. Explicit. Systematic intervention targeting specific comprehension weakness like vocabulary of the new language or vocabulary of the same language but in a different content area. Ulitin ko po, hindi ibig sabihin na ang bata ay marunong nang magbasa sa English. Ibig sabihin that the students can automatically transfer the skills in all other subject areas. Hindi po, kasi nga there's a possibility that vocabulary, the meaning of these words as used in the subject area is totally different. Nagkakaroon ng changes in the behavior of this the use of the language. The rules of the language would also change. All right. So we need to help our students be able to transfer the skills in others, not just in another language, but of the same language in a different content area, especially in the case of MOTL, medium of teaching and learning. Okay, so English in math, English in science, Filipino as a subject, Filipino as used in literature, Filipino is used in Araling Palipunan, Filipino is used in EPP, Filipino is used in. So mga bata, kahit naturuan na sila magbasa sa Filipino subject, posible magkakaroon sila ng struggle, okay, struggle sa pag-intindi ng mga konsepto na nakapaloob sa mga talasalitaan na ginamit sa edukasyon sa pagpapakatao, ESP, sa pagpapakatao or EPP, edukasyon sa pangkabuhayan at basta EPP. All right, and so on and so forth. So that cannot be assumed. It has to be, again, it says explicit. Sir, hindi naman ako nagtuturo nun. Kaya nga sinasabi po natin, pag sinabi natin remediation, pag sinabi natin intervention, it cannot be the responsibility of the language teachers. It is the responsibility of all teachers because all teachers require students to read, period. Hence, in that premise, all teachers have the responsibility to identify specific reading problems of our students that make them struggle in their learning process, and thereby teachers are required to do something about it. Nagbibingi-bingihan, nagbubulag-bulagan ang most of our content area teachers, or they will blame the language teachers. Sabi ng Araling Palipunan teacher, ha! Hindi nyo maintindihan ang binabasa ninyo. Anong tinuturo ng mga Filipino teachers ninyo? Wait lang, ma'am. Kayo na po ang nagtuturo sa amin ngayon eh. Wika na po, ang Filipino na to ay nasa wika na ng Araling Palipunan. Pwede po bang kayo naman na magturo sa amin paano namin intindihin para magkaroon kami ng comprehension sa wika ng Filipino na gamit sa Araling Palipunan? Huwag niyo na pong sisihin ang Filipino teacher namin. Kung ako siguro estudyante nung, kasi ako ay sumasagot talaga nung ako estudyante. Talagang sasabihan ko teacher, teacher, kayo po ang nakakalam kung paano ginagamit ang wikang Filipino sa Araling Palipunan. Ang aming Filipino teacher po ay nagtuturo ay ang wika ng Filipino. Pero pwede rin po magkaroon ng integration. Mamayang gabi natin pag-usapan yan. Alright. Next, we have mixed reading difficulties. All right. So did I discuss include oral vocabulary and language intervention? Importante po dito yung include oral vocabulary and language intervention because it helps our students acquire word attack skills, not just in reading, not immediately on reading, but if we constantly engage our students in oral activities, making them talk about it, there is what we call as listening vocabulary acquisition. Listening vocabulary acquisitions, and the more they listen to these words or they get to be exposed these words, then little by little it becomes part of their oral vocabulary. All right, and once it becomes part of their oral vocabulary, it's whether we like it or not, it becomes part of their long-term vocabulary stored in their brains and their minds, and then eventually they will be able to recognize automatically these words in reading selections or in selections once they are used in different subject areas. Point is, at home, it is very important that we tell our parents that, Ma'am, kausapin niyo na pa nun yung mga anak. At tapos, gumamit kayo ng mga bagong vocabulary. That's what my mom did nga. Sinasabi ko sa inyo na I think it was easier for me to be predisposed to liking and be addicted to reading a lot of books because my mom was a voracious reader. And I believe my first novel that I've read when I was in grade 5 was The Love Story by Owen McNeill. I think you remember. I will never forget that. And eventually, as I entered grade 6, 7, and 8, I was engaged in Nancy Drew, Hardy Boys. And then by high school, nagkaroon po ng rage ng novels na Sweet Valley High, na kung naalala nyo pa yung mga ganun. Anyway, the point is that reading fluency and reading skills actually starts at home. The behavior of reading can be influenced by how children are exposed to the reading behaviors of parents and adults that they live with. If children are exposed to an environment at home where adults do not engage in reading activities like reading newspapers, listening to news, or opening books every now and then our students definitely would not have an early experience on what we just have discussed, an idea, a cognitive landscape of the different text styles. That's why a lot of students are easily taught the reading skills because at home they have been pre-exposed to all of this literacy and reading materials. All right. So the last group of reading difficulties that we can create interventions on would be mixed reading difficulties. Ito ay sobrang dami na. Okay. So descriptions are decoding below average. Reading comprehension below average, even in text children can decode. Ibig sabihin, kahit pa yan mas pang elementary na, nasa high school siya, kahit pang elementary pa yan, hindi pa rin niya ma-decode. Kasi nga, mababa ang decoding dahil hindi siguro naturuan. And then reading fluency often weak due to limitations in both decoding and language. Hindi lang decoding ang problema. Hindi lang ang new language. Diba? Kaya maraming mga bata na, ang tali-talino pero pagdating sa English, ayoko na mag-English. But they have the skills in the language of Filipino. Bakit hindi nila ma-transfer sa English? It's because they feel like it's a new language. Then pag ginamit na nila yung new language na yun, they don't have the skill. Yun lang. Hindi lang talaga sila naturuan how to use that language. Again, as I've said, in the comprehension, in the specific reading comprehension deficits or difficulties, what we can do is engage our students in oral conversations to improve their oral fluency, because reading fluency, our oral fluency also affects and influences our reading fluency. And once our students acquire a certain level of oral fluency, it's easy for them to transfer that to reading fluency. And this fluencies interplay so that we are able to help our students transition this fluency skills from one language to another. Only that there must be explicit teaching of the similarities and differences of one origin of language to the target language. But again, we are teaching them the target language, not because of the language per se, but because we want them to be literate and readers. Nakuha po natin. Kasi kung tinuruan lang natin ng language, what we have forgotten the purpose that we're teaching them English so that they can read and be literate in English. Wala na. Bakit po naging ganon? Nasobrahan ng too much grammar, okay? Too much language instruction, forgetting literacy, using language for literacy and reading development. Pag sinabi ko ng literacy at reading, redundant na. Literacy. Well, towards numeracy too. All right. So what are the strengths of students with mixed reading difficulties? Salam. Individual children usually have strength-specific areas of language or reading. Their knowledge based about specific interests. They know what they're interested on. So you can start there. So kung may problem, itong mga bata na mixed reading, hindi ka pwedeng mag-require. Unlike yung dalawang clusters po, dahil meron na silang level of skills na sa kanila, pwede pong sabihin mo ng content area materials. Pero sa mixed reading difficulties, for the remedial students, uunahin mo palagi ang kanilang interest. Kung ang bata ay ang interest niya ay sports, then you'll have to use sports as the basis for looking for materials for them, for materials for you to make or to look for, whether it's instructional, contrived, or authentic, para maturuan sila ng decoding skills or vocabulary skills. Bakit po? Dahil hindi mo sila ma-oblige or may encourage to focus on the vocabulary or learning the vocabulary or learning and acquiring the phonics skills on a topic that they are not interested to talk about, to read, or even to be engaged in. So, diyan magkaiba. Unahin mo ang interest dito. Remedial sila nga eh. May problema na nga sila pagbabasa, tapos hindi mo pa i-consider ang kanilang interest, wala na. Lalo silang bagsak. So intervention needs. The intervention needs for mixed reading difficulties would be a combination of the intervention we provided for the students with specific reading vocabulary difficulties and for students with specific reading comprehension difficulties. So pinagsama-sama sila. We have to provide them with explicit systematic phonics intervention. PA means phonemic awareness and fluency intervention. ample opportunities to apply decoding skills in text reading with teacher and parent feedback. Kailangan palagi may feedback yan, kailangan may support, because without the support, they would not definitely engaged in. Kasi mas ang mga bata with mixed reading difficulties, they rely more on external motivation. Mababa ang kanilang self-esteem. Mababa ang kanilang ang kanilang internal motivation. All right. Next, explicit systematic intervention targeting specific comprehension and weaknesses, focusing on vocabulary and other skills. And finally, include oral vocabulary and language in intervention. So, usap. Let them engage in oral fluency activities, conversations every now and then on the target language, Filipino or English. The reading problem is not just for English. It is also present in all languages, be it mother tongue or Filipino. Nonetheless, it is our responsibility to identify these difficulties among our students so that we can come up with really good intervention and cluster them, whether this is more of specific reading vocabulary difficulties or specific reading comprehension difficulties, or a combination both, mixed reading difficulties. All right. So, gosh, that was too much information, I suppose. Let's now proceed to the fourth question and last question. So these are now some of the home activities that we can come up with to help. I don't want to say it's correct, but to actually support the learning of our students, to prevent. I would rather go for prevention than intervention, because I would rather come up with activities at home right now during the pandemic, come up with certain activities at home, suggest to the parents as an educator what they can do to support the learning and the acquisition explicitly, this reading skills, this early reading skills, this critical reading skills, this evaluative reading skills, or differential reading skills to their children while at home, and supporting that, and they're able to pay attention to the progress of their students. So these are my suggestions now. So fortunately, fluency can be taught. So thank God that even parents at home can teach fluency. And it is very important for our parents and for educators to understand that it is important for adults to read aloud to children, modeling what good readers do. Show children how you pause for punctuation and change your voice to make text more meaningful. So parents who talk to their kids with a speed that is leveled to the level that is leveled, appropriate to the age group or to the age level of the students, with proper intonation, would facilitate easy acquisition of early oral listening fluency skills. But in a house where children are growing up, where parents and adults seldom talk to their kids or seldom talk to these children, kids would have a delay. They will not learn the skills. They're not gonna acquire it. There will just be a delay in the acquisition of the skills. And such delay, and if not given emphasis during entrance to, say, preschool to grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, then the foundation that they should have acquired at home becomes profoundly bigger in problem, because hindi natutukan ng teacher na turuan. Okay? Dahil nakafocus sa content, nakalimutan ng language. Dahil nakafocus lang sa language, nakalimutan ng literacy, and so on and so forth. So these are some of the simple activities that we can come up with to prevent. Okay? Ito pong sinasabi ko, I would rather go for prevention, pero nabigay ko na po kanina ang mga corrective and remedial, specific to the 3 clusters of possible groups of reading deficit students that you may be able to identify among your students. Okay? So let us have an example. So ganito daw dapat magbasa ang, well, sasampulan ko lang po ulit, pero I already had a session on this on learning at home, on preschool series po ng Vibal. I think I had this the second week of July. So you may want to go back and review that. And I already specifically talked about storytelling and read aloud, but I'll give you an example on this. So ganito dapat daw magbasa sa mga bata. The 3 little pigs. Once upon a time, there were 3 little pigs, And the time came for them to leave home and seek their fortunes. Before they left, remember ang poses ha? Ibang mga teacher, before they left, their mother told them, hindi na di-distinguish ng bata, ano ba yun? Nagpause siya, bakit mayroong stringing? So, namamodel yun ha. So, kailangan minomodel kita sa oral fluency muna tayo. So, narinig ang bata, pinapakinggan tayo sa model. Before they left, their mother told them, whatever you do it best that you can, because that's the way you get along in the world. That should have a closing quotation mark there, all right? The first little pig built his house out of straw because it was the easiest thing to do. The second little pig built his house out of sticks. This was a little bit stronger than a straw house. The third little pig built his house out of bricks. One night, the big bad wolf, who dearly loved to eat fat little piggies, came along and saw the first little pig in his house of straw. He said, let me in, little pig, or I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house in. Pause. To change characterization, sorry. Not by the hair of my chinny chin chin, said the little pig. But of course, the wolf did blow the house in and ate the first little pig. So we somehow, that you are reading that to the child, the kids or the children at home are now exposed to this type of oral fluency that they may also later on realize that's how they should be reading the book too. Okay, now on that note, for teachers out there, if there are no parents can support this type of intervention program or preventive programs for our students, especially in the early grades from kinder to grade 3, where the foundation of fluency are specifically and explicitly taught, I suggest that your modules be with an audio material. So there's a module that they have, like say, especially for text that they're going to read, but it comes with an audio so that they hear the teacher, the model of the teacher's oral fluency or the reading aloud fluency of the teacher, and they're able to follow it. And one way or the other, we are now coming up with an intervention program for our students who may be struggling with their fluency skills. All right. Now, there are several ways to help struggling readers with fluency. Reading, the adult model standard student practice, choral reading, I think you know this already, reading in unison, so sabay-sabay magbabasa. It's really good for classroom situation, but at home, ang gagawin po dito ay magsabay-sabay po ang nanay at ang mga anak o yung mga anak, sabay-sabay sila magbabasa. Assisted reading is when reading along with the recorded text. Yung may record po, yung sinabi ko kanina may binabasa po siya, pero naririnig niya yung audio. And then partner reading, reading along with another student, where you can ask students to partner with another student. Say they have a partnership activity where they're supposed to read together the selection. That could be another one. One, if the struggling reader, the other one is a struggling reader, the other one is independent reader. The independent reader somehow not really rubs on, it somehow models to the classmate who is a struggling reader, somehow approximate how an independent and expert fluent reader does the reading of the material. And finally, we have the Reader's Theater, which is very common from preschool up to high school. Reader's Theater is a very interesting activity to engage in at home too. In short, dramatization role play that can be done, like ask them to dramatize, like ask students what the best their favorite book or the favorite story that they like most, and then they can dramatize that. Or better yet, if they're not yet readers, good listeners, you can ask them to dramatize what they have watched. Like my dalawang pamangkin nun, they were so engrossed with Frozen, to the point when they keep on playing over and over the Frozen, and then they have internally memorize each line, even the actions and even the nuances of the changes of the emotions. And it was fun because they thought, well, they were just thinking that they were just having fun, but in reality, they were already developing oral fluency, which led to their being, fluent readers too. All right. So I'll just run through to you some of the activities that you can come up with at home. Activities for emergent readers. I'm not sure. I don't have my cell phone here, but I don't know what time it is now. But let me just finish. I'm almost done. So for emergent readers, typically between 6 months to 6 years old, these are the things that you can do at home. Read aloud dynamic and exciting books. Read nursery rhymes and poetry with repetitive text. Good. Go on a picture walk before reading to understand the structure of the story. So instead of engaging immediately on the book, you may want to let your kids to go over the pictures, so at least the child has an idea what the story will be all about, and somehow get an idea of the sequence of the events via the pictures. And then we have also model how to predict by offering your own suggestions, like asking questions like, what will the pig do after this? What will the big bad wolf do? So you are modeling to the child that even if they are in the middle of reading, they can still ask questions, or their mindsets they're being active, okay, or actively engaged in questioning the text. Next would be ask questions about the story and model how to answer them. I just did that. Encourage children to make connections to the story. Like if you were one of so questions like putting them in a situation of some of the characters, or if they were, the writer of the selection, how would they, present some of the events in the story, something like that. And then remind them of related events that have happened to them. Like could they relate that to what happened to them previously, and help them make connections to the story and their previous experiences. Then point out important events and illustrations and make connections back to the point. If you observe, some of the suggestions are highly, there's a high interaction between an adult and a child. And that's basically how it's done, right? That should be frequent adult and child interaction with literacy. Now, these are some of my suggestions for home activities for beginning readers, typically between 6 and 7 years old. So continue read aloud stories. So what you've been doing for your preschoolers, for your toddlers, continue on until 7 years old, okay? Then model how to questions, predict and comprehend, similar to still. And then to the preschoolers, introduce new vocabulary context here. You now introduce complex words, like asking questions, now zoning on what the, I think these kids at this stage, a lot of them would be honest and ask you questions like, Mama, what is the meaning of that word? So when your kids ask you questions that word, you start first with the context of the story. Huwag agad yung dictionary. So kasi nga pag nagbabasa po tayo, ordinarily we use independent word attack skills, and the dictionary usually is our last recourse of especially for technical terms. Okay. And getting the definition of getting the meaning of unfamiliar words. So, turuan muna in context. Focus on letters in their own name and other meaningful words. So, focus on who they are. Stories that reflect their own experiences. Stories that reflect their own attitudes and behaviors with other kids, and so on and so forth. Then read the environment, and when shopping, point out signs and labels. You can, do what they call as an in-house tour. You can ask them what are printed in the house. Of course, dapat kung may meron mga nakalabas na print, nakalagay siguro meron nakalagay God is good, yung mga nakalagay dyan. You go around the house, tour around the house, and look for what we call as house prints, also known as environmental prints, that you can, ask them to decode every now and then. Or part of that would be asking them to recognize the words automatically. These are some of the activities for decoding readers, meaning they are now in the formal school, typically between 7 to 9 years old, and they are being taught decoding skills, phonemic awareness skills, or phonological awareness in general, phonemic awareness, phonological awareness skills, or decoding skills. So you can ask questions while your child is using strategies to read unknown words. Let's have an example like this. Halimbawa, a child says moose instead of mouse. You ask, does that look and sound right? Then point to the word. All right. You remember they are being taught Kayong mga magulang, alam nyong tinuturuan na sila sa lessons nila ng decoding. So mas maganda nagsusupport kayo by, at looking at those specific, applying those decoding skills by, sitting down with them. Child, yes, let's start with then you ask, does that sound right? The moose live in a tiny little space. So tingnan mo, hindi muna kinuha ang dictionary. Tinutulungan ng nanay o ng tatay yung anak para tingnan, para makuha ang meaning ng word na yon, para modify ang kanyang pronunciation of the word. Child, it sounds okay. Yes, does that make sense? The moose lived in a tiny space. Child, no, it doesn't make sense. A moose is too big. Finally, ask your child to read the sentence again, this time reading for meaning. That, okay? Maganda po yung mga ganun activities. Alright? Huwag agad ibibigay agad ang sagot. So by providing support to the child to look at specific clues, how he or she can modify and correct themselves is a better way to help your kids become fluent readers. So we are now into between fluent readers, fluent and fluent independent readers. They are now, you now observe that they are now fluent readers. They are self-monitoring on a regular basis. They read different for purposes, including expanding their own interests. They read longer text, tracking the information they need, and are aware that they read can influence their opinions. Ang masasabi ko lang po dito ay i-support nyo kasi mga bata na po nasa, pag na-reach na nila ang fluent readers, they become voracious readers. Ang ginawa ng mother ko to nung ako ay nasa high school grade, first year ang tawag namin nun, is that bawal pa kasi sa amin nung kumuha sa Talo Leyte kasi merong public library. And then ang allowance ko noon ay yung jeep namin ang jeep po ay from San Joaquin to Tacloban. I was studying in research R&D sa Leyte National High School. Tapos pag uuwi ako kasi pupunta ako ng library at sasakayin ko, I will ride a jeep from Tacloban to Palo so that I can stop by the public library because I was so addicted to reading when I was in high school. So I cannot not stop a day. I cannot have a full day without reading a book. So ang ginagawa ko po nun is that I would from school in Leyte National High School, I would ride a jeep from Palo and then bababa ako doon sa kanto ng Palo, sa Palo kasi nandun ang public library, and I would stay there until 5:30 to 6:30, sometimes 7 o'clock hanggang magsara daw ang public library. Okay? Kilala na ako ng librarian doon. Tapos binigyan ako ng library card. And then dahil wala na akong pamasahe, naglalakad na lang ako pa uwi. My mom was so parang flabbergasted as to why oftenly I would come home very late in the evening, and then I would not do my homeworks and assignments. Said, grabe naman to, wala namang ginagawa na, parang pagod na pagod. Then she asked me, and I told her that I stopped over the public library. Yung pala, pinsan pala niya, or relatives along, parang malayong pinsan, yung librarian. So what my mom did is, we were not rich, puro po kami. So syempre, she had to do something about adding on to my daily allowance, para meron ako pamasahing pag-uwi from Palo to, and then nag-usap sila ng librarian na ay allow akong mag-uwi ng libro ng 5 books sa Monday so that I can read that from Monday to Friday kasi I can finish 1 book sa gabi. I will not, stop reading it hanggat hindi ko siya tapos. So pagdating ng Friday night, iuwi ko lahat, then I will be allowed to. But what I'm trying to say here is that because once you have seen your kids are now mahilig magbasa, may mga magulang na, ano ba kayo, basa kayo ng basa dyan? Yung mga magulang na pag nakita ang mga anak nila, basa ng basa, galit na galit. Excuse me, please support that. But turuan ng anak yung tamang oras kasi baka maging wala nang nagawa sa buong araw, puro lang basa ng basa. But that's good. You need to support that. Pero kung basa ng basa the whole day naman po, ang tawag po natin doon ay hindi nyo nabigyan ng routine and responsibilities at home. You cannot have students who are really good readers, but they are not responsible individuals. You need to strike a balance between becoming fluent and independent readers, but at the same time, functional members at home. All right? With that being said, thank you very much. And I'm now ready to, I'm now ready to entertain questions from you guys. So what time is it? I don't have a clock. I left my cell phone in the other room.
Hello, brother.
Hi, Julia.
Thank you so much, Brother Roderick. Now we will proceed to the question and answer portion. Our first question is from Al Cameron Avila. Based on your opinion, sir, does the introduction of mother tongue in teaching core subjects in the elementary affect the comprehension of learners? Thank you po, brother.
It does. Um, because our students in the early grades, I would say about mother Filipino, so starting from preschool up to grade 3, our mother tongue program in the Philippines is from preschool up to grade 3. What happens is that our students are still learning to read and decode in the mother tongue, and yet what we did is that we have introduced them to read. Okay, read content texts written in mother tongue in the subject areas, like in grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. They're still being taught how to read, okay, how to read in the mother tongue, and yet they are expected to be readers in the subject areas and other subject areas. That's preposterous and that is insane. But then again, we already proposed to my colleagues and I, my friends and I will not mention their names because I have to protect their privacy, in the language policy that we somehow sat down as consultants for Department of Education. We wanted to focus more on reading muna, focusing on helping students acquire fluency in the mother tongue before they are demanded to be readers in the subject area. What we have right now is actually more of a, how do I say that? That it would not sound so bad. It is more of mga medyo pinadali. Pinadali na curriculum para ang bata maturuan magbasa sa mother tongue, tapos may mga subject areas na dapat nilang mabasa na agad. Let me just say it needs improvement. The design needs improvement, and it needs to be refined in such a way that it conforms to the idea that let's focus first on literacy before asking our students to transfer their literacy skills in the mother tongue to reading in mother tongue in other subject areas. Not to mention that once they learn how to read in the mother tongue, here comes Filipino and here comes English. That happens since grade 1 to grade 3. So your kids are learning 3 languages at the same time, while they're still being literate and learning how to read in those 3 languages. The other subjects are demanding that they're already readers in these 3 subjects. So that's insane. The kids, you cannot, I could just imagine what's happening in the minds of our students. They are, confused. Sasabihin nila, ano ba talaga ang gusto nyo mangyari sa buhay namin? Tinuturuan pa lang kami magbasa sa mother tongue, tapos pagdating namin dito sa math, nagbabasa na kami sa math in mother tongue. Kalokohan to. I'm sorry, that's my honest answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, brother. Our next question is from Miss Rosemary Amparado. Are there standard tests that measure the reading level of students that you can suggest? Thank you po,
Um,
brother.
Yes, there are a lot of reading tests that you can use, but I would suggest that you try Miscue Analysis. All right, the Miscue Analysis is a more thorough type of assessment procedure that you can come up with. There are a lot of free Miscue Analysis tests for the early grades up to the higher grade levels that can be used to help identify the specific problems or the reading levels of our students. Now, if you find out that via reading Miscue Analysis, you found out that it is too complicated for you to use, because yung mga reading specialists kasi have been trained to do Miscue Analysis as a way of gauging the reading abilities of your students. Pag hindi pa kayo nasanay ng paggamit ng Miscue Analysis, then I'm suggesting that you use There we have EGRA po. That's early grade reading assessment. We have early grade reading assessment for grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 in mother tongue, Filipino, and English. We request that from central office. That has already been normed and validated. I was one of the consultants in standardizing and contextualizing the EGRA in the Philippines. I was a consultant for USAID for a year, and we have finalized that. So you may want to enlist or get the instrument on EGRA. Here in Imos and Dasmariñas, we're using EGRA to identify identify the reading levels of our students, specifically identifying certain problems or the deficits of our students in the early grades up to grade 3, so that we can do something about it. Because if our students' problem in the early grades are not intervened, it will be compounded as they move to grade 4, 5, and 6. And by the time they enter grade 7, the problem is so profound that the grade 7 teachers will be at a loss how to deal with the students who are still struggling, who are struggling readers, and yet they are required to be independent readers, and they are supposed to read lots and lots and lots and lots of texts. So what we would like to do is that you can access this instruments. You can ask your EPS, Education Program Specialists and Divisions, to request EGRA. That we have EGRA in mother tongue, EGRA in Filipino, and EGRA English. We also have numeracy test. We call it as EGMA. That's early grade reading math assessment for grade 1, grade 2, and grade 3, also in mother tongue, Filipino, and English. Another one that you may want to access would be PhilErie. PhilErie, if done and administered the right way, it will yield good data for you to identify your students' reading and literacy strengths and weaknesses. Only that, I think, hindi lang talaga na-explain na, kasi mga standardized na po ito, naayos na po ito, talagang norm na po talaga sila. It will yield good results. So I'm highly suggesting, again, Miscue Analysis. But if you have problems doing that, kasi mostly the Miscue Analysis requires a lot of training for teachers to use, you may go for EGRA. Now, if you're thinking of students in the higher grade levels, like 4, 5, 6, you may want to use PhilErie. What about for high school? There are already existing standardized tests in reading for high school. You have all. Well, I'm not sure if we have from Vibal, but there are some established. I'm not going to mention. It's coming from other publishing houses, but you may want to research on that. But I think Vibal and I should sit down together and come up with, a packet or a package for reading interventions for specific reading difficulty. Thank you very much for that question, and that's how I'm going to answer that.
Thank you so much, brother. And for our last question from Jonah Alim. In
Hi,
this time
Jonah.
of no face-to-face instruction, how can we detect learners with reading deficits? We will be using printed modules.
Well, oh well. You people, you come up with really difficult questions for me to answer, and pushes me to give my own opinion of what's happening in the real scenario in our public system. Oh well, ideally, I'll start with the word ideally. The teachers, we call them as receiving teachers of students, should have a copy of a summary of the performance of students in the previous grade level, so that the receiving teachers get to know the performances of the students based on their performance using rubrics, analytic rubrics assessment, or via the test results of the quarter unit test consolidated, and have a summary as to who students who are overachievers, underachievers, or instructional level, or independent level, and so on and so forth, which again, it's somewhere we're doing that. Na pag na-receive na ng mga teachers ang next grade level, may summary sila para alam ng teacher na nagre-receive sino ang kanyang kailangan tutukan at kailangan hindi, at may mga problema. So when they come up with programs for that year level for the students that the teacher will receive, they're able to come up with, what are instructional materials I can give for those students who are in the right level. For students who are struggling, these are the things that I can come up with because they have been pre-identified. Now, in your case right now, I was hoping that similar activities should have been done in the public school system, in the private school system, because what happens if you are not given a summary of the performance of your students that you're receiving for the grade level from the previous teacher in the lower grade level, a summary of their performance. This is what we call as a blind technique of preparing materials, to the point, especially right now, since there's no face to face, the teachers right now will not be able to identify who are struggling or not. You're just hoping that some of the students will be honest enough, or the parents will be honest enough to tell you that their kids are having difficulty with the materials that you prepared. But alas, yun po masasabi ko, all your materials right now is what we call as trial and error. Trial and error because you do not know who among your students will be able to actually understand, comprehend the materials, because it will require a lot of skills on reading, because it's highly modular. It's highly reading based type of materials, whether it's online or modular. It would still require your students to utilize their reading skills. And since you have not identified your students' skills and level of reading, you came up with the idea that these materials will be okay, with the idea that these materials are for students within the grade level. But what if your students their performance is not within the grade level that they are supposed to be performing on? Now, that's a huge challenge. So I would suggest that at this time po, sana, itong sinasabi ko, I already requested the Vibal for next week's topic is on how do we actually prepare for the opening of classes? Do we have a data that would help us identify students who need more scaffolding, more support on their reading skills, and those students who can be identified? That's why my topic last week on distance education, I suggested that those students who are independent readers already can go through finishing the modules in the ALS way. Independent na sila. Tatapusin nila. Sabihin mo lang sa kanila na by Friday, you're supposed to take a test. Bahala ka i-schedule nun. But there are some students who are struggling a lot. Sila dapat ang bibigyan mo ng maraming instruction. You may want to review my session on distance education and types of delivery modes for distance education of my webinar of last Friday. That would answer your question on this. But I'm sorry to say, but what's happening right now, because you don't have a data of the students you receive for your the grade level you are teaching, of their previous performance, then it's a blind technique in teaching current students. And it's a huge task and a huge problem for teachers right now, because if there's no face-to-face interaction, you wouldn't immediately know who are struggling and those who are surviving. Thank you very much for the beautiful but perplexing question.
That's all the questions we have for now. Any last reminders to our viewers for today, Brother Roderick?
Definitely. So these are my challenges, conclusion and implications and challenges to you teachers out there. So information about individual poor readers' patterns of reading, whether it's specific reading word difficulties or specific reading comprehension difficulties, or a combination of both, also known as mixed reading difficulties, or SRD. It is very important for us to identify those problems so that we can extremely help our students and know the starting point for us teachers to teach where and what reading intervention program can we provide for our students. Now, children with SRCD, or students with specific reading comprehension difficulty, that's SRCD, aren't likely to profit from phonics intervention, whereas those with SWRD, or specific word reading difficulty, and MRD, or mixed reading difficulty, generally can. So we need to know what specific intervention can be is most appropriate to this groups of students with certain difficulties. Successful phonics intervention should enable struggling readers with SWRD or specific word reading difficult to attain great appropriate reading. Hence, it is very important for us to always provide them with sight word reading. Okay, so again, as I've suggested, go back to DALT sight, basic sight words and Fry's graded sight words. And then of course, create your own list of high frequency words. And then finally, a fluency intervention that emphasizes speed and automaticity of word decoding may help children with SWRD or specific word reading difficulty and mixed reading difficulty, but it's unlikely to help this fluent reader with specific reading comprehension difficulty who may benefit from much more from intervention focused on vocabulary and comprehension development of different text types. Now, children with different patterns of reading difficulty also tend to benefit from different technology. Yan ang sinasabi ko, technology supports, like use of graphical presentations. I already have a webinar on this. I called it as developing and enhancing graphical presentation. So you may want to review that. That is that webinar helps you to address this challenge to you that I'm posing right now, and to display different kinds of strength that can be tapped in the classroom. So I already had a lot of webinars that can be linked together to help you address certain problems of our students. You may want to go back to it. I already made my handouts available for you. You just requested from my moderators, Michelle and Jillian, and I think they're just going to attach this to, I don't know how they're going to do that, but you may want to inquire how you can avail of the handouts of the topics that I already delivered so that it can support you in adjusting to the new normal in the school year 2020 and 2021. With that being said, muchísimas gracias, buenas tardes, hasta until this afternoon, hasta la noche. Hasta la noche. Until this evening, I'll see you again. I will have a continuation of my talk this evening. It's about language learning and integrating that to the content area. And I will be discussing specifically how we help our students learn their language learning from one module to a module in science and a module in mathematics. With that, again, thank you very much. I hope you learned a lot from our session. If not a lot, at least a little. There's a takeaway that you can take from my fast and quick talk. But you can always go back to the recording of this webinar and review it over and over so that you can at least understand the way how I explain it. But with that, thank you very much and good afternoon.
There we have it. On behalf of Vibal Group Incorporated, I would like to thank our speaker for today for this very insightful and generous learning session. It is an honor to have you with us today, brother. And to all our Kavibal viewers, all thanks to you for your continuous patronage to our daily learning session. Muli, maraming salamat at magandang araw sa ating lahat.